So good afternoon. Happy holidays to you, whatever holiday you celebrate. I hope you can hear me with the mask. And we're going to go back to 1934, nearly 90 years ago. And it's the Great Depression, and the world is a mess. We have Hitler, we have Mussolini, the fascists, the dictators from Italy and from Germany. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this. It's called the Production Code. And how many of you watched movies in the 1940s, 1950s, and wondered about, were these movies censored, like Some Like It Hot? Well, they did try to censor that movie in places like Kansas because of the Production Code. This picture approved by the Production Code Administration of the Motion Pictures Production and Distributors of America. That changed movies totally, and that happened in 1934. Remember her, Shirley Temple, Good Ship Lollipop and all? She becomes a star in 1934. There are the Gangsters, Bonnie and Clyde in 1934. The Great Depression continues. Now it's going into its second presidency in the United States with Franklin Roosevelt, started in October 1929. Although the Great Depression was relatively mild in some countries, it was severe in others. Particularly in the United States, it bottoms out in 1933. 25% of all workers and 37% of all non-farm workers are completely out of work. Some people starved. Many lost their farms and their homes. Homeless vagabonds sneaked aboard freight trains. The lady is a tramp. In that song, they talk about she lowers her light. Well, that was the vagabonds who snuck on trains. They crossed the nation. Dispossessed cotton farmers, the Okies, stuffed their possessions. They went west to California in their dilapidated Model Ts, hoping to find something in California. So the Great Depression continues. This is an employment agency in Manhattan, and it's one flight up. People are looking for jobs. On January 30th, Congress passes the Gold Reserve Act, allowing the President, Franklin Roosevelt, to fix the value of the US dollar at between 50 and 60 cents in terms of gold. The next day, Franklin Roosevelt signs the Farm Mortgage Refinancing Act, establishing the Federal Farm Mortgage Corporation, designed to help farmers pay their mortgages by granting them easier terms of credit. Well, is there a recovery? In this cartoon, well, Roosevelt's sailing the ship, but is it getting anywhere? Is there a recovery from the Depression? Roosevelt won the 1932 presidential election, campaigning on the promise of the New Deal that would transform America, bringing relief from the devastation of the Great Depression. And there was also one other thing that was going on, the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl. And dust would go to the east, and you couldn't farm on the land because the dust went elsewhere. Under Roosevelt, the federal government would pour money into the economy, pass laws, and develop programs to pull the nation out of the Depression. The New Deal was introduced in 1933, but the New Deal was not enough to pull the United States out of the Depression by 1934. At the height of the Depression, that was 1933, 24.9% of the total workforce, or 12,830,000 people, were unemployed. Farmers were not counted among the unemployed. Drastic drops in the farm commodity prices resulted in farmers losing their land and their homes in foreclosure. On June 4th, Roosevelt asked Congress to appropriate $52.5 million to help out farmers in the Midwest who are suffering because of the severe droughts throughout much of the Great Plains. Roosevelt's aid plan provided cash grants, livestock feed, and farm equipment. It also offered free emergency medical care to the poverty-stricken people. That is the Dust Bowl. Just dust flying up in the air. And it would fly, and it would go thousands of miles. 1931, a severe drought spread across the Midwest. As crops died, winds began to carry dust from the overplowed, overgrazed lands. The number of dust storms jumped from 14 in 1932 to 28 in 1933. The following year, 1934, the storms decreased in frequency, but increased in intensity, culminated in the most severe storm yet in May. People walking on the street, they're not near the farms. They're breathing in all this dust. On May 11th, massive storms sent millions of tons of topsoil flying from across the parched Great Plains region as far east as New York City, Boston, Atlanta. The dust storm forced thousands of families from Texas and Arkansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas, and New Mexico to uproot, migrate to California, where they were known as Okies, no matter what state they came from. These transplants found that life out west wasn't much easier than the place they had left. Work was scarce, pay meager during the worst years of the Great Depression, 33 and 34. There is a slight recovery, though. There's Franklin Roosevelt. New Deal policies decreased unemployment incrementally. Unemployment dropped to 21.7% from 23.9% in 1933. But the American gross domestic product rose to 10.8%. The Great Depression was easing somewhat. Well, that's the United States. What's going on in Europe is a problem. Germany, Hitler, Mussolini, fascist dictator of Italy. Japan, they are at war with China, although it's not an official war at this point, but they invaded China in 1931. That's Kaiser Wilhelm inspecting the troops. Kaiser Wilhelm, of course, was the leader of Germany during World War I. Europe goes to war. First World War and the subsequent peace settlements gave rise to new ambitions, rivalries, tensions. People had high expectations that the post-war peace settlement would create a new world order and ensure that the slaughter of the First World War was never repeated. Armistice Day comes around, November 11th, 1918. It's the end of the First World War, but it's the beginning of the post-war era, and it would eventually lead to fascism, Nazism. Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919. That is Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, and he's part of the four guys that are splitting up Europe. David Lloyd George of Great Britain, Vittorio Orlando of Italy, Georges Clemenceau of France, and Wilson, they're the victors. They get to choose what happens. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in June of 1919, created the League of Nations. That was an international body intended to promote peace and prevent war. The treaty was an uneasy compromise between the Allies, Britain, America, France, Italy. Italy would eventually turn fascist. They all decide we are going to pursue our own interests. Germany was forced to surrender territory, disarm, and pay for the war's damage. The divisive conditions were criticized as overly vindictive by people in Britain and in the United States. The treaty's terms caused immediate outrage and lasting bitterness in Germany. But there's an irony here. As you look at Adolf Hitler, Hitler would come to prominence in 1920 by delivering a speech outlining his plan, which would be the Nazi plan, as early as 1920. But there is an irony after the Treaty of Versailles. Germany is left in a surprisingly strong geostrategical position. Poland's created, Czechoslovakia's created, the Baltic states. And the treaty put a buffer between Russia and Germany. Fighting among the new states weakened them, The geography of the new borders made it difficult to defend. Germany emerged from the war with a small, relatively weak bunch of states on its eastern border. 1923, World War I is officially over with the Treaty of Lausanne in Switzerland. Although senior statesmen stopped working personally on the conference, Treaty of Versailles in June of 1919, the formal peace treaty to end the war takes place in July of 1923. It's called the Treaty of Lausanne, and it's signed by France and Britain and Italy and Japan and Greece and Romania and the new Republic of Turkey. So the question is, why did Hitler hate Jews so much? To the point where he wanted to exterminate them in the 1920s. Why did he hate Jews? Well, he was a soldier during the First World War between 1914 and 1918 in the German army. He was Austrian, but he fought for the Germans. At the end of the war, he and the other people who fought for Germany couldn't believe they lost on the battlefield. Couldn't be them. Couldn't be them at all. Had to be something else. Something else. And then comes the big lie, the big myth. The German Army Command said, we were too good on the battlefield. We were too good. It had to be something else, something else. We were betrayed. Well, who betrayed them? It's called a stab in the back. Hitler bought into the myth, bought into the big lie that Jews and communists had betrayed the country and brought a left-wing government to power that wanted to throw in the towel. He's arrested and he writes this, Mein Kampf, my struggle. What struggle? What struggle did he have? Wasn't a good artist? I don't know. In his memoir, in Propaganda Track, I mean, this guy's writing a memoir in 1923. 1923, what has he done? Nothing.
How old was he?
He probably at that point was nearly 40, somewhere around there. The propaganda track, Mein Kampf, my struggle. Adolf Hitler predicted a general European war that would result in the extermination of the Jewish race in Germany. Mein Kampf was written in jail after Hitler was arrested for his participation in the beer hall push in Munich on November 10th, 1923, when the Nazi Party tried to overthrow the German government. Hitler goes to jail, but he's released in December of 1924. These were his cohorts, 1922, Nazi Party members. Very strange people, these people, extremely strange people. But he was part of it. In fact, he was their leader. By blaming the Jews for the defeat, Hitler created a stereotypical enemy in the 1920s and 1930s. The defeated country, Germany, was still in a major economic crisis. But according to the Nazis did not have much support in 1928. Only about 4.8% of the people said they supported the Nazis. According to the Nazis, expelling the Jews was the solution to all the problems in Germany. On February 25th, 1932, Hitler became a citizen of Germany. He was Austrian. He's talking about German purity, but he was Austrian. He was talking about getting the non-Germans out. He was a non-German. Hitler was born in Austria, immigrated to Germany in 1913, renounced his Austrian citizenship in 1925, but he's giving speeches by 1920s talking about, hey, you got to get rid of everybody who's a non-German in Germany, and he was a non-German. This political message and the promise to make Germany economically strong again won Hitler the elections in 1932. That's the president of the country, Paul von Hindenburg. And Hitler would be named chancellor under von Hindenburg. It's January 30th, 1933. Hitler, the leader or the Führer of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party, is now the chancellor of Germany. Hitler's plan was embraced by much of the German population, and that was to do away with politics and make Germany a powerful, united, one-party state. Night of the Long Knives Well, here they are. The Nazis are meeting. It's June 30th. There was a purge of stormtroopers, the SA leadership, and other supposed opponents of Adolf Hitler, and there's a purge. The purge comes to be known as the Night of the Long Knives. More than 80 SA leaders are arrested and shot without trial. Hitler means business. Hitler claimed that the purge was in response to a plot by the SA to overthrow the government. The SA, under the leadership of Ernest Röhm, had sought to take the place of the German army. The removal of Röhm wins Hitler greater support from the army. Von Hindenburg dies in 1934, and with that, the last hurdle is cleared by Adolf Hitler to become a total dictator. It's August 2nd, and the German president Paul von Hindenburg dies at 87. Upon von Hindenburg's death, Adolf Hitler takes over the powers of the presidency. The army swears an oath of personal loyalty to Hitler. Not to Germany, but to Hitler. That's who they are loyal to. Hitler's dictatorship thus rests on his position as Reich President, or the head of state, Reich Chancellor, head of the government, and Führer, leader of the Nazi Party. Hitler's official title now is Führer and Reich Chancellor. He is now the dictator. Nobody is going to tell him no. It's August 18th. The German public voted 90 to 10 in favor of Adolf Hitler becoming the Führer, the leader and chancellor, a new title created after the death of the President Paul von Hindenburg. Hitler had dictatorial powers unequaled in any other country. Well, there's his tag team partner, eventually, Benito Mussolini. In 1934, Hitler and Mussolini meet for the first time. The rise of dictators in Europe and Asia during the 1930s can be attributed to a combination of factors. Economic turmoil caused by the Great Depression, the aftermath of World War I, political instability, and the desire for strong leadership in the face of perceived threats. In Japan, militaristic leaders gained power in response to economic challenges and a desire for expansion. The whole future of you, me, I wasn't born, but the whole future is being laid out in 1934. 1919, Benito Mussolini created Italian combat squads. The group engaged in violence against socialists and other enemies. 1921, he founded the Fascist Party, turning his paramilitary movement into a formal political party. Here he is with the black shirts in 1921. These guys mean business. 1921, Mussolini was elected to the lower chamber of Italy's parliament, the Chamber of Deputies. The next year, tens of thousands of armed fascists marched on Rome, demanding Mussolini be named prime minister. The Italian king, Victor Emmanuel III, refused to declare a state of emergency and impose martial law, and opens the door for Mussolini. Instead, he dissolves the government. And he tells Mussolini, hey, Benito, go form a new government. Big mistake. Big mistake. Mussolini became both prime minister and interior minister, the latter post critically giving him control over the police. Mussolini reached power in accordance with the Italian constitution. Many businesses and financial leaders believed it was possible to manipulate Mussolini. They were wrong. It's the first meeting between Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. And if you notice, Hitler is not in a military uniform at this first meeting. It takes place on June 14th. Mussolini was asked for his thoughts about Adolf Hitler. His response, he's a mad little clown. Might have been right. There were other dictatorships too. Latvia becomes a dictatorship, or gets a government that's a dictatorship. The Latvian coup of 1934, also known as the 15th May coup, or the Ulmanis coup, was a self-coup by the Prime Minister, Karlis Ulmanis. against the parliamentary system in Latvia. Ulmanis, with the support of the Minister of War, Janis Valdelis, and paramilitary organization, took over control of the main and state and parties, of the main and party offices, proclaimed the state of emergency, suspended the constitution, dissolved all political parties in the parliament. So what do you got going on here? You got Germany, problem. Latvia, problem. Italy, a problem. Austria, a problem. Japan, a problem. The world is burning up. Ulmanis was unique among European dictators at the time. He didn't create a one ruling party and didn't introduce a new constitution. Instead, he created a state-controlled chamber of professionals. Another dictatorship, Brazil. Brazil, another dictatorship. Vargas, Getúlio Vargas becomes the president of Brazil in 1930. On July 17th, he's elected president by a constitutional assembly. The new constitution granted the central government greater authority, provided for universal suffrage. Everybody could vote. Vargas would become a dictator. And then there's this dictator, Joseph Stalin. In 1934, he gets down to whatever business he wants to get down to. Following the death of Vladimir Lenin, I was going to almost say Vladimir Putin, Lenin in 1924, a power vacuum opened in the Communist Party, the ruling party in the Soviet Union. Various established figures in the Lenin government attempted to succeed him. Joseph Stalin would emerge as the party's general secretary, and he beat all of the political opponents and gained control of the party by 1928. Initially, Stalin's leadership was widely accepted. His main political adversary was Leon Trotsky, and he was forced into exile in 1929, and the doctrine of socialism in one country became enshrined party policy. In the 1930s, though, party officials began losing faith in Stalin's leadership following the human cost of the first five-year plan and the collectivization of agriculture. By 1934, several of Stalin's rivals, such as Trotsky, began calling for Stalin's removal in an attempt to break his influence over the party. Then comes Sergei Kirov's murder, and Stalin uses this to consolidate power. He was the mayor of Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, and that happens on December 1st. And this is a pretext to launch the Great Purge, in which about 1 million people died. Kirov was a staunch Stalin loyalist, but Stalin may have viewed him as a political rival because of the emerging popularity among the moderates. 1934 Party Congress elected Kirov as the Central Committee, to the Central Committee, with only 3 votes against him, fewest of any candidates. Stalin received 292 votes against him. After the assassination, the NKVD charged the ever-growing group of former oppositionalists with Kirov's murder, and as well as tension growing with other offenses, including treason, terrorism, sabotage, and espionage. Okay, let's talk about censorship. This is part of a bigger censorship talk that I have, censorship of television and radio movies. Now, got a question for you. Back at this time, did movies, which were talkies, they were 7 years old by this point, the talkies, did movies have the protection of freedom of speech, yes or no?
Yeah.
The answer is no. Movies did not have freedom of speech protection. And there were a lot of problems in Hollywood, starting with this guy, Fatty Arbuckle. I don't know how many of you have heard of Fatty Arbuckle. He was the star, the star of 1921. He was bigger than life. But he's accused of raping and killing a starlet. And the movie industry decides we have to clean up the movies, or we're not going to survive. 1922, silent film comic Fatty Arbuckle, charged with manslaughter in the death of an actress. A bisexual director found it murdered. Movie stars dying of drug overdoses. Hollywood has a major problem, and the industry knows it. Studio bosses decided to clean up their image. So who are they going to clean up their image with? They find the most corrupt man they could in the United States in 1921 to clean up their image. His name is Will Hayes, and he was the campaign manager for Warren G. Harding in 1920 in Harding's successful bid for the presidency, beating James Cobbs. Hayes was a politically active lawyer, became the chairman of the Republican National Committee in 1918. He was the campaign manager, and he told Harding, look, we don't want you out there. We don't want people to know how stupid you are. So just stay home, conduct a front porch campaign for the presidency in 1920, and don't say anything. Just smile. He was successful. Harding's administration was one of the most corrupt in United States history. Harding only lasted 2.5 years. He died of a heart attack in August 1923. The Teapot Dome scandal, 1926, happened during Harding's presidency. The oil man, Harry Ford Sinclair, devised a scheme in which 25 cents was diverted from the sale of every barrel of oil sold from Wyoming and 2 California oil field leases that were the focus of the Teapot Dome scandal. Sinclair testified that he loaned Will H. Hayes, then the chairman of the Republican Party, $185,000 worth of Liberty bonds. He got back $100,000. Sinclair also gave Hayes $75,000 as an outright gift to the committee. Sinclair gas. It's come back to the New York area. This is Montana. $2.79 a gallon in Montana in 2015. That was Sinclair's company, Sinclair Gas. At the time, Hayes was attempting to pay off 1920 Republican campaign debt. Hayes later approached a number of wealthy men and told them, hey, look, give me some money, let's pay down the committee debt, and you know what, I'll reimburse you with Liberty bonds. Hayes would testify before Congress, lied a little bit, but let's call it hid some facts. But this is over 100 years ago, so we can actually say lied about things. But he was unscathed by the ordeal. Sinclair would eventually go to jail for contempt of court. Hayes would go over and clean up the movie industry. There was always censorship in the movie industry. That is Charlie Chaplin at his best. Mutual Chaplin specials. In 1913, Ohio passed a law forming a board of censors, which had the duty of reviewing and approving all films intended to be exhibited in the state. The board could order the arrest of anyone. Think of that. The board could say, oh, that's pornographic. It might not be, but if they say it is, they could arrest you, put you in jail for an unapproved film in the state. Mutual Film Corporation, a movie distributor, sought an injunction against the board in Ohio. Mutual argued that in addition to the violation of its freedom of speech, the censorship board was interfering with interstate commerce in violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause, and the government had illegally delegated legislative authority to a censor board. Those arguments were dismissed by a court. That's Mutual's logo. The Supreme Court of the United States in 1915, in the Mutual Film Corporation versus Industrial Commission of Ohio case, said that free speech did not extend to motion pictures, which is kind of odd because there was no speech in those movies. It was all silent movies. There were cards that went up and down every once in a while, but there was no free speech. New York became the first state to take advantage of the Supreme Court's decision by instituting a censorship board in 1921. Virginia followed in 1922. The ruling's impact from the Supreme Court of the United States. Well, Will Hayes leaves the Harding administration, and he was the Postmaster General on January 14, 1922. And he becomes the chairman of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America shortly after the organization's founding. So we go back to Fatty Arbuckle and Virginia Rappe. Virginia Rappe was allegedly raped and then killed by Arbuckle. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was accused of the rape and murder of the model and actress Virginia Rappe. There were calls by religious groups for federal censorship of the movies. They've already censored the movies, the Supreme Court. No freedom of speech. Hiring Hays was a public relations ploy, and much was made of Hays' conservative credentials, which included his roles as a Presbyterian deacon and past chairman of the Republican Party. Less than a week after his arrest in 1921, Arbuckle's films had been pulled from every screen in America. Arbuckle was accused of causing Rappe's death and was tried 3 times. And 3 times he was found not guilty. Not guilty. Well, Hays to the rescue here. Here's Will Hays. Here's the movie industry. And some guy yelling, "Save me, save me, save me. Save me." Hollywood film scandal. Vice, among other things in this cartoon by Hungerford. Save me, save me, save me. No federal laws are going to save the movie industry. But he's coming in. He's the boss. Even though he has no mandate, official legislative mandate, for censorship. His main role was to persuade individual state censor boards not to ban specific films outright and to reduce the financial impact of the board's cuts in edits. The studios were required by state law to pay the censor boards for each foot of film cut and each title card cut out. Studios had to pay the expenses of duplicating and distributing separate versions of each censored film for the states or states that adhered to the particular board's policy. Hays institutes a moral blacklist in Hollywood. It's not binding. It's not binding. But the people running the studios go ahead with it. And he inserts moral clauses in actors' contracts. 1930, he was one of the authors of the Production Code, a detailed enumeration of what was morally acceptable on screen. But there would be a number of years before the code really takes place. If you have TMC, in the morning, they show those pre-code films, and some of them are pretty risque. The Motion Picture Code of 1930. Is that obscene or not obscene? That picture. According to the code, it's obscene. She's a secretary turned prostitute. If motion pictures present stories that will affect the lives for better, they can be the most powerful force for the improvement of mankind. That's the mandate. A code to govern the making of talking, synchronized, and silent pictures. Formulated and formally adopted by the Association of Motion Picture Producers, Inc. and the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, Inc., March 1930. Motion picture producers recognize the high trust and confidence which has been placed in them by the people of the world, which have made motion pictures a universal form of entertainment. They recognize their responsibility to the public because of this trust and because entertainment and art are important influences in the life of the nation. That picture of Joan Blondell, obscene or not obscene?
Pretty much.
Obscene or not obscene? What do you think?
Yes,
Yeah.
they would call it such.
Yeah, this was a promotion for a movie she was doing. It never got out. Hence, though regarding motion pictures primarily as entertainment without any explicit purpose of teaching or propaganda, they know that the motion picture within its own field of entertainment may be directly responsible for spiritual or moral progress, for higher types of social life, and for much correct thinking. This is Ina Claire, 1932. Obscene or not obscene?
No.
It's obscene. It's obscene. I'm their player. During the rapid transition from silent to talking pictures, they have realized the necessity and the opportunity of subscribing to the code to govern the production of talking pictures and of re-acknowledging this responsibility. On their part, they ask the public, and from public leaders, a sympathetic understanding of their purposes and problems, in a spirit of cooperation that will allow them the freedom and opportunity necessary to bring the motion picture to still a higher level of wholesome entertainment for all people. Yes?
I remember when I was little, having to take an oath not to see these pictures
Oh, okay.
from the pulpit in church on
Oh, okay,
Sunday.
yeah, well, who was behind it? The Catholic Church.
Right.
They were behind
They had
it.
their own Legion of Decency and.
Yeah,
and it was
the League of
pub-
Decency, yep, yep,
And we had to check it before we went to the movies.
yep. Obscene or not obscene? Claudette Colbert.
No.
No.
Abstain. Will Hayes came up with his list of 36 self-imposed don'ts and be carefuls, informally known as the Hayes Code or the Code. According to Hayes, the code sets up high standards of performance for motion picture producers. It states considerations which good taste and community value make it necessary in this universal form of entertainment. Producers cannot mock religion. The depiction of illegal drug use, prohibited. Interracial marriage, banned. At that point, interracial marriage was banned in 17 states. Revenge plots and the showing of crime method, clearly enough that might be intimated on the don'ts list as well. Obscene or not obscene? Betty Boop, cartoon character. Is that obscene or not obscene?
Probably.
Not, it is obscene. They redesigned the character. Betty Boop was a 1920s flapper. She's in the flapper dress. She's got the garter belt on. She was redesigned. The production code was voluntary for film companies, but it was mandatory for filmmakers if they wanted their films to play in American audiences. Betty Boop, cartoon flapper in the 1920s, was redesigned and wore long skirts. How many of you realize that Betty Boop was censored when you watch Betty Boop cartoons?
No.
Betty Boop was censored. Oh, here's Claudette Colbert again. Obscene or not obscene?
No.
She's covered virtually from head to toe. There she is. 1933, the Roman Catholic National League of Decency was founded, and they began to rate films independently, putting pressure on the industry, right? They told you, you made a vow, right? You're not going to see these movies. 1934, the Legion, along with a number of Protestant and women's groups, launched plans to boycott films they deemed immoral. Well, what may be immoral to you might not be immoral to me. Censorship. The motion picture producers and distributors of America had, up until then, enforced the motion pictures industry's own self-censorship standards, but not very seriously. Hayes, who began his work in 1927, worried that the NLD, National League of Decency's efforts could weaken his own power and his office and could hurt industry profits. He appointed a tough Irishman by the name of Joseph Breen to head the Production Code Administration, the newly created department of the MPPDA, created to administer the Motion Picture Production Code. Unlike previous attempts at self-censorship, the PCA's decision became binding. No film could be exhibited in any American theater without a stamp of approval from the PCA. Any producer attempting to do so faced a fine of $25,000, which, remember, it's the Depression, it's 1934, that's a lot of money. This is Joseph Breen. Joseph Breen was a former newspaper reporter, and apparently an anti-Semite as well. After 10 years of unsuccessful voluntary codes and expanding local censorship boards, the studio approved and agreed to enforce the codes. And the nationwide production code was enforced starting on July 1st, 1934. Joseph Breen began heading the Production Code Administration in 34, and he imposed the code. The journalist turned censor. This picture approved by the Production Code Administration of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, certificate number 1. And this is what Joseph Breen said about movies, what you cannot do. Sex and relationships. Overt portrayals and references to sexual behavior can't be shown. Adultery as a subject has to be avoided. Complete nudity, never permitted. Interracial relationships, not allowed. Sex, hygiene, and venereal disease, not appropriate subjects. Scenes of childbirth, never to be shown. Homosexuality, never to be depicted. Scenes of passion should only appear when necessary and should not be explicit. More don'ts. Crimes. Crime and immorality could never be portrayed in a positive light. Criminals should not be made to be heroes. Methods of committing crime could not be explicitly presented. Illegal drug usage, not permitted. Religion. Ridicule of the clergy, not allowed. Religion could not be depicted in a mocking manner. Words like God, Lord, Jesus, Christ, hell, damn cannot be used unless it was in connection with religious ceremonies. The code did not apply to Broadway and stage productions. Screenwriters could write plays about subjects that were seen too controversial for Hollywood. The code also meant that many non-white actors could not appear in films. These movies were made prior to 1934. Mae West, she done him wrong. I'm No Angel, with Cary Grant. That's also with Cary Grant. They could not be re-released. When Paramount wanted to re-release She Done Him Wrong and I'm No Angel, the films were rejected by Breen. Whenever a film was rejected, the studios could appeal the decision to the board of directors of the MPPDA. To make sure that Will Hayes would turn down both pictures if Paramount decided to appeal, Joseph Breen wrote Hayes the following letter saying that the pictures were definitely wrong. How many of you enjoyed Mae West? What Mae West movie? Did you tell the people?
Never seen one.
I wouldn't take the oath.
Oh, you didn't take the oath.
I didn't.
Oh, okay. Breen was an anti-Semite. The movie industry was run by Jews, except for Joseph Kennedy and Darryl Zahn. Breen wrote anti-Semitic letters in the early 1930s, including phrases like 95% of these folks, studio owners, are Jews of Eastern European lineage. They're probably the scum of the earth. And it placed him in the spotlight of historians' assessments of the controversy surrounding Hollywood's degree of collaboration with the Nazis throughout. Hollywood was careful not to criticize Hitler in the Nazi regime. Shirley Temple. How many of you like Shirley Temple? Good Ship Lollipop?
Right.
Right, among others. She becomes a major star in 1934.
And
She-
married.
Yeah, well, later on. She begins her career in 1931. She's 3 years old. After viewing one of Temple's Frolic of Youth films, Fox Film Corporation songwriter Jay Gorney saw her dancing in the theater lobby. Recognizing her from the screen, Gorney arranged a screen test for Temple for the film Stand Up and Cheer. She was auditioned on December 7th, 1933. She won the part and was the breakthrough performance for Shirley Temple. Here she is in a movie with James Dunn called Bright Eyes. After the success of the first 3 films, Temple's parents began to realize that she's making all this money from the studios. She's not making any money for herself. Her image began to appear on numerous commercial products without legal authorization and without compensation. To regain control over the use of her face, her likeness, and to negotiate with Fox, Temple's parents hired a lawyer, Lloyd Wright, to represent them. On July 18th, Temple's contractual salary was raised to $1,000 a week, and her mother's salary was raised to $250 a week, with an additional $15,000 bonus for every film finished. Cease and desist letters were sent to many companies, and authorized corporate licenses, her authorized corporate licenses began to be issued. Now, the funny thing about Joseph Brain and Will Hayes, the thing about them, we don't want any crime, right? We don't want any crime to be depicted. So who were some of the major characters in 1934?
Who were the gangsters?
The gangsters like Dillinger. The code may have started in 1934, which was intended to stop the glorification of gangsters, but Americans couldn't get enough news about Al Capone, John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde. Capone entered the Alcatraz penitentiary in May, he went to Atlanta in 1932, and he was transferred to the new Alcatraz prison in August of 1934. He was still alive. John Dillinger and his gang pulled off a bloody string of bank robberies throughout the Midwest in the 1930s. The FBI said that Dillinger's gang killed 10 people, but Dillinger was never convicted of murder. Dillinger was awaiting trial in the slang of an East Chicago police officer when he escaped jail, Crown Point, Indiana. In March 1934, with a gun carved out of wood, while on the run, he underwent plastic surgery to alter his face and was said to have removed his fingerprints with acid. This is a controversial picture. John Dillinger, after he's dead. And that part's the controversial part. People have talked about that picture forever. Like,
Why?
why? Here's his midsection, and something is erect. Talk about censorship, right? This wasn't censored. John Dillinger. On July 22nd, Dillinger was slain by 3 bullets fired by an unnamed federal operatives after they had been tipped off by a woman. Anna Compenis, Manham from a brothel in Gary, Indiana, also known as the Woman in Red, cooperated with the FBI in exchange for their help in preventing her deportation to Romania. Bonnie and Clyde's car. Here you go. It's all shot up. Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow, began robbing grocery stores, filling stations, and small banks in 1932 in March. And they became folk heroes. In 1932, the couple killed 2 officers in Atoka, Oklahoma, where they had attended a dance and were apprehended in the parking lot. For a while, they swept through the Midwest and the Southwest, challenging the law in Texas and Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Missouri. They gunned down a grocery store owner in Sherman, Texas, a citizen in Temple, and a police officer in Dallas. There's Bonnie, smoking a cigar there with a gun in her hand. In January, Parker and Barrow helped their buddy, Raymond Hamilton, escape from the Eastham farm, and guard was killed there, in prison there. At the time, the head of the Texas prison system and the government hired the former Texas Ranger Captain Francis Frank Hammer to track down the couple. By the middle of 1934, Hammer and his associates had begun to follow Bonnie and Clyde. He found them. They drove into a trap near their hideout in Back Lake, Louisiana. On May 23rd, 9:15 a.m., they were gunned down by a barrage of 167 bullets. Bonnie Parker was found riddled with bullets, holding a machine gun, and a sandwich, and a pack of cigarettes. There is Clyde. Clyde Barrow, barely recognizable, was clutching a revolver The car was taken to Acadia, Louisiana, and the bodies were later delivered to Dallas. Thousands viewed the mangled bodies in the cars of the legendary lovers. Finally, amid public clamor and hysteria, the bodies were buried in respective family burial plots. Pretty Boy Floyd, he's dead too. This picture is better than Dillinger, I think. Pretty Boy Floyd. Charles Arthur Floyd, Pretty Boy Floyd. So the American bank robber operated in the West and the Central States. His criminal exploits gained him widespread press coverage in the 1930s. He was seen as a positive by the public. They thought of him as a hero because it was believed that during the robberies he burnt mortgage documents, freeing many people from their debts. He was persuaded and killed by the Bureau of Investigation, later renamed the FBI, agents led by Melvin Purvis on October 27. Alcatraz opened. I walked out of Alcatraz back then. The United States Disciplinary Barracks on Alcatraz was acquired by the United States Department of Justice on October 12, 1933. The island was designated as a federal prison in August. Alcatraz was designed to hold prisoners who continuously caused trouble at other federal prisons. At 9:40 a.m. on August 11th, the first batch of 37 prisoners arrived at Alcatraz, arriving by railroad from the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, to California. One of the first prisoners transferred was prisoner 85. Prisoner 85 was known as Al Capone. How many people here are Donald Duck fans? He makes his first appearance. Is he a he, or is he a she, or is he an it? It's a cartoon character. Do cartoon characters have gender?
If you call him Donald, they do.
Well, take a look at him. He's wearing a sailor suit, but he has no pants. So how do we know?
Right.
Did you ever think of that? I mean, Mickey Mouse didn't wear pants, did he?
You don't know if he's a boy or a girl,
Yeah, I
right?
don't know if he's a boy or a girl. He's not wearing pants. Porky Pig never wore pants. Anyway, Donald Duck makes his first appearance on June 9th in Disney's Wise Little Men. It's a short film. The character, a white duck known for his quick temper, his mischievous pranks, and his blue sailor outfit, except it's only half an outfit. 1934 legacy. Well, there is Franklin Roosevelt, my wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, me up in Hyde Park. New Deal programs were successful. Programs like the Works Progress Administration, the Public Works Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps created 10 million jobs. Participants built hundreds of miles of roads, bridges, installed thousands of miles of water systems and electric grids. The economy was improving. By 1936, unemployment dropped from 25% to 11%. Now, that's me in the former East Germany in Reichstag. No Nazis. Nazi Party was outlawed in Germany. Hitler and Mussolini became allies. Stalin was allied with the West during World War II. Germany annexed Austria, Czechoslovakia in 1938, invaded Poland September 1st, 1939, which started World War II. The war ended in 1945. Oh, Dolores Del Rio. Is that obscene or not obscene?
Oh,
Dolores Del Rio. Remember Dolores Del Rio? She was an actress. Liberty Magazine wrote 1936 that Joseph Breen had more influence in standardizing the world thinking than Mussolini, Hitler, or Stalin. Breen pressured Metro Goldwyn Mayer to drop plans to film Sinclair Lewis' best-selling anti-fascist novel, It Can't Happen Here, after there were 60 edits. It can't happen here. Fascism will be wrapped in a cross when it comes to America. That was the central theme of that book. He also asked MGM in 1938 to change the villain from Nazis in an adaptation of an anti-Nazi novel, Three Comrades, in order to get away from the suggestion that we're dealing with Nazi violence and terrorism. Joseph Green. Can you imagine what Joseph Green would think when he sees movies like Bonnie and Clyde starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway? 1934 legacy. Neither Will Hayes nor Joseph Green would have appreciated movies that were released glorifying criminals, including Pretty Boy Floyd in 1960, Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962, Al Capone, 1983, John Dillinger, 1973, Bonnie and Clyde. Alcatraz closed on March 21st, 1963. It's now a national park. The code was replaced by a rating system in 1968. Here's Shirley Temple. She was an American actress, singer, dancer, diplomat. She was Hollywood's #1 box office draw as a child actress from 1934 to 1938. Her career was effectively over by 1940. Later, she was named United States Ambassador to Ghana and Czechoslovakia, and she served as Chief of Protocol of the United States.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What did she do in that job as a leader of protocol?
Hosted parties for Richard Nixon.
Right?
Yeah, for Richard Nixon. She hosted parties for Richard Nixon. So, here's Donald Duck, and he's still not wearing any pants. He's got the sailor's hat on, he's got the sailor suit on, and he's not wearing any pants. Yes.
You said in the early rendition of this section,
Yeah.
you stepped out of Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Was that as a visitor
Yeah.
or as a prisoner?
No, I was too young to be a prisoner there. I'd only be 7 years old, and I wouldn't even be, yeah, I'd be 7. Donald Duck was included in TV Guide's list of the 50 greatest cartoon characters of all time in 2002. Here are the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He has appeared in more films than any other Disney character. Any questions, any comments? Your turn to talk. Your turn. Any comments?